Hey, everybody, welcome back to another edition of the His and Her Money Show, where we make it our business to help you take dominion over your money and your life. Thank you for tuning in because you could be elsewhere, but you are here. And for that, we are grateful. We are excited about today's episode because we're going to be talking about marriage. We're going to be talking about how you can make your marriage better, or maybe you're on your way to being married and you need this advice beforehand. That's part of the story of our guest. They could have used some advice beforehand. And so they wrote a whole book to help you if you are on your way to being married and spending your life with someone. Today's episode is for you. We are excited to have some friends of ours back to help us all become a little bit better at this thing called marriage. So do me a favor, get your pen and paper ready or pull out your notes app on your phone, because I'm sure there'll be plenty of jewels drop that you're going to need to remember. So get ready. We're going to go get Kevin and Mellisa Fredericks. They have a brand new book that you need to know more about. So stay tuned. Here we go. Hey, Kevin. Hey, Mellisa. Welcome back to the His and Her Money Show.
Thank you so much for having us, man. Since the last time we talked, we paid our house off in cash.
Wait a minute. Pause.
In cash. I bought some groceries in cash. I'd be like, boy, cash.
Cream.
Y'all did all that?
No, we didn't.
Not at all.
Not much really
the groceries, at least.
Groceries in cash. No, I used my credit card for the airline miles.
Oh, dang, man. Dang.
Paid it off in cash for my bank account. I gave my son some cash. He asked for lunch money.
Man.
You got some on your card? He said, I want cash. I said, man, you've been listening to His or Her Money.
We're so glad that y'all are back, man. Y'all are way more famous now than you were. And y'all were pretty famous back then, but now y'all been doing some big major things. It's truly been inspirational just watching you all's journey from how this thing started to where this thing is today and even what's to come. But listen, as big and as wide and as vast as your reach is, there may be some people being introduced to you all for the first time right here and right now. So for them, could you just say hello and then just kind of let them know what y'all are all about?
My name is Mellisa Fredericks. I am a wife. I am a mother. I am a little bit of the influencer thing. I wrote a book that we're talking about. I also host a show on the Kev on Stage Studios app. And, I'm just a woman of many different hats, and I do a lot of things.
I am Kevin. I'm an amazing person, husband, father, friend, comedian, content creator, son of Christ. I like Game of Thrones. And I guess I can add author.
Author is added to the list.
I wasn't an author before, but now I'm an author as well.
That's what's up. Y'all wrote a new book called Marriage Be Hard. First of all,
thank
the
you.
cover is amazing.
All my idea.
It's just so y'all. It's just so real. Y'all got to buy the book just for the cover.
Mellisa,
I'm telling y'all, this is amazing. Talk to us about what made you, because y'all do so much. What made you all say, you know what? Let's write a book, and let's write a book about marriage.
Yeah, well, I think the Love Hour podcast had ended, and we always enjoyed helping people in their marriage because marriage is very important to us. And we wrote the book that we wish we had to read when we were first, newlyweds. We grew up in church, and the majority of our time was spent around church, and everybody around us was like, yeah, our marriage is perfect. It's fine. It's fun. We don't have no issues. And Mellisa and I would go through our struggles and be like, nobody else is struggling but us. And lo and to the behold, a couple years later, some of them same people who never had an issue we saw every Sunday ended up divorced. And we're like, what happened between all these conversations? And now y'all already irreconcilable differences. And we realized that people weren't having the best marriages. They were struggling to communicate. And we wanted to write something that was practical that could help people. I felt like, it was like a cake. We had all the ingredients to make an amazing cake, right, set out in front of us, and we had access to an oven. But nobody told us, of these 12 eggs, you're going to use 2. And this is how much salt, and this is how much nutmeg. You're going to mix this, wait, add this, and you're going to bake it for that amount of time. We just were like, here's the ingredients. Put it in there and you'll have a cake. So we wanted to write the recipe from our point of view to a fun and healthy marriage, and that's why I wrote the book.
How did you know that there was more? Because part of what you all discuss in the book is your marriage was based on what you saw, what you thought it should be, what you thought it would be. And so y'all cross over into marriage and you're living your life. Some people are in the same boat. They're just doing what they saw and what they thought, what they think marriage should be. So, what was part of your wake up call to say, you know what? There has got to be more. This can't be it. Because some people might not even realize that there could be more.
Yeah, I think that if you were, for us, I feel like the quarantine 2020 was like a really pivotal year. And by that time, we were married for 16 years. So we're a long way into this thing where you feel like, child, after 16 years, y'all probably found y'all groove. Y'all know what y'all doing. All is well, all is cool. Except it was a time that a lot of things were exposed, and you start asking yourself questions. And maybe I think at the heart of it is what you're saying, like, is there more? But also, is this it? Am I happy with what this situation is right now? And could it stay here? And this would be, and I would be okay with that. We always talk about, or we've heard people talk about, our grandparents of old that were married for, 50, 60, 70 years. They never got divorced. And I ask myself today, is that the only measurement of success? Is the only measurement of a successful marriage that we didn't get divorced? Because my answer to that question today is that that's not enough. I need a relationship that's healthy and fulfilling and happy. And when you're just like, well, I mean, we've been married for 20 years, I ain't going nowhere, he ain't going nowhere. Well, then it sounds like y'all need to, some things need to be shaken up. Some things need to, you need to reinvigorate your relationship. And I think that year 2020, going into marriage therapy, understanding that the pandemic had us looking at each other like, I don't, we writing this book and I don't know how much I like you right now. Like, this finna be a different book. All of those questions make you realize, oh, yeah, we've been together for 16 years, but in that 16 years, we've also built up resentment. We've also had conversations that we didn't have. We've also had conversations we did have that went really bad and we need to redo. All of those things are an opportunity where you're asking yourself, there is more. Like, I know there's more. I want this. I'm in this, but I want it to look different. And you have to go out and chase that.
So, for you all, when you all got to that point, you're in the pandemic, I mean, from the outside looking in, everybody's looking at y'all as relationship goals. You all are building this incredible business. You all are creating content that's helping other people. And at the same time, this moment in history made you guys look at each other like we need we need to rework some things. We need to reconfigure some things. How did that first conversation after the realization go? What's your advice if somebody has that realization, like, nah, we need to talk this through. We need to fix some things. That could be a scary moment because you have this knowledge that we need to talk, we need to fix, but there might be that fear of the other person's response, or there may be some fear of being vulnerable and transparent about how you feel right now.
Yeah, I think for us, what was essential was therapy. We were both going to individual therapy, and then we also started couples therapy. The reason therapy was very helpful is because you have a mediator, right? You have a person that's only goal is to healthy your relationship. Each of us, obviously we want a healthy relationship, but we have our own desires and needs and biases, and a lot of times you can't see any other point of view than yours,
Mhm.
and it's tough to see your spouse's. So a therapist allows a person who, hopefully, in the ideal situation, doesn't have Melissa's side or my side more than the other.
The relationship is their client.
The relationship is their client. That's good. I like that. And I think for us, it allowed us to be honest. And then if there's somebody to tell you when you're wrong and when you're right, that's not your spouse. Because sometimes your spouse tell you you're wrong, and you can't hear it. But a person outside telling you, hey, actually your spouse is right about this, or to watch your spouse be told they're wrong and to enjoy that and be like, ha, I've been trying to tell you, I ain't tripping. So I think that I can say, to Melissa's earlier point, Had we not done that, I think we would have been married for a long time. But, like she was saying, longevity isn't a indicator of health in a relationship. It's just time. You can do anything for a long time. You can play in the NBA for 25 seasons. Doesn't mean you're good. I mean, it's unlikely, but you get my point.
Yeah.
And just because you're married for 20, 25 years, that doesn't mean you're happy. And I think early on, that was our barometer.
Mm-hmm.
Just stay together because people are getting divorced. If you're staying together, you're already winning. Back in the day, people never got divorced. So, back in the day, women couldn't get jobs that easily either. So there was nowhere to go. And that's the reason a lot of people stayed. So to answer your question, I don't remember your question.
Well, I think it goes to
You said the mediation of therapy helps
yeah.
you all have a conversation with
Sometimes
each
I
other.
talk so much that I just get attached to the sound of my own voice.
Hello. It was a good answer, Kev.
So I'm curious about this. And let me back up. If you are trying to approach this conversation, maybe you don't have therapy going on right now, I would recommend Kevin and Melissa's book because they give you 12 conversations that you all need to have, and they put tips at the end of each chapter to help you have the conversation that you need to have and give you some things to think about within that particular category. When you all were thinking through these topics, things like roles in the marriage, things like communication, things like intimacy, how did you all come up with the list of, hey, these are some conversations that you all should probably be having with each other to strengthen your marriage?
We say this from the Love Hour perspective, and also I think it's applicable to the book. We're our own first students. We're our own first test dummies. These are conversations we wish we had earlier. These are conversations we wish we could redo. Even when I think about the parenting chapter, those parenting and the quarantine chapter are my personal two favorite chapters. The parenting chapter, particularly, is because we went into that chapter thinking how much we were going to be able to boast about how great of a partnership we had, because when our kids were young, I fed them, Kev changed them. We had this whole routine going. And by the end, you start to realize, wait, this was a really fragile, transitional time in our relationship that we didn't even understand in real time, that impacts us today, 18 years later, or well, 16 and 14 years later, because that's how old our kids are. But we didn't have an appreciation for how fragile transitions are. When you think about a change of power, every 4 years, when we have a change of power in the United States, it's a super vulnerable time in our democracy. I mean, the 2020 election was a prime example that we were like, what is going to happen to America if this man decides not to step down? It is a super vulnerable time. When kids entered our relationship, we didn't have an appreciation for how that was going to change our dynamic. And that's a conversation that surprised us, that like, wait, this isn't going the way we thought this chapter was going to go. And so I think it's a question that other married couples with children can go back and say, how did that affect us in the way that maybe we're not realizing? How did kids entering our relationship change our dynamics that we maybe didn't realize in real time, but we're suffering those consequences today, and we maybe haven't been able to articulate it, or we maybe haven't had a conversation about it. Again, we're our own first test dummies. We're our own first students. So we realize it. So that's why we talk about it. And that's why it's the book we wish we had.
Yeah.
Now, you talked about earlier how you all would be sitting like secretly miserable. You're looking at these other couples that are around you that seem seemingly happy, and then next thing you looked up, they're not married anymore. What do you think is the difference between because the book and the premise and the message that you're giving us is that marriage be hard. How do you find the guts, the courage, that when it gets hard, to not quit, to do the work instead before giving up?
I think I'll use this analogy. I think sometimes it's important for us to realize that, we're on the same team, right? You watch a football game, the offense takes the field, the defense takes the field, the special teams take the field. They're all on the same team. They may not be playing at the same time. And sometimes the offense is playing poorly, the defense is frustrated. Sometimes the offense is playing great and the defense is struggling. The offense is frustrated. But at the end of the game, your team wins or your team loses. And I think for us, it was important to realize that we are on the same team. Sometimes it doesn't feel like that. But like the relationship is the client for the therapist, our marriage is important to us. So we had to remind ourselves of that often to kind of like recalibrate ourselves. And you have to do what's best for the team. Like that's why we started therapy. We realized we had been trying, I'll speak for myself here. I had been avoiding therapy because I felt like if we go to therapy, it's a sign that something is wrong.
Mm-hmm.
Right. And I secretly, I don't know why and where this misguided thought came from, but I secretly had started to feel like we could, boast a little bit. I mean, we've been married 15, 16 years. We ain't even went to therapy. Y'all over there having to go. We ain't got to go. That's how good our marriage is. And then all of a sudden you're arguing or the same thing over and over, and you're feeling like, I don't know how else to tell this woman this. And I remember telling Melissa, we should, we would go back and forth. But I remember one time I was like, I don't know how else to deal with this scenario. I want to rectify this, but I'm out of answers. We really should talk to someone that can help us navigate this. And then once we started, I remember like the first session with our current therapist, and I'll be honest about this. Our first therapist was butt,
Trash.
sweet butt juice.
Trash.
So we had to
Trash.
make sure we had to let that person go and find somebody that fit. And it's okay if the first one or two or three
Listen,
don't work.
it's a whole
Keep going.
process.
Yeah, it's a process.
Don't be discouraged. We all got to go through it.
But I remember in the therapist that we have now, I remember having the moment where I'm like, oh, she's a professional at this.
Right.
She's thinking of questions and making connections that Melissa and I would have never made. And that's why it's helpful. It's as silly as it sounds. It was like having pneumonia and being like, I ain't gonna go to the doctor. I'm gonna be able to tell people that I beat pneumonia myself. How do you make penicillin? I'm sure there's some rubbing alcohol and some hydrogen and some garlic salt. You'd be
Definitely
like,
garlic sauce in there.
somebody's went to school for this. Somebody can help you. So that's kind of how I was thinking about it.
Melissa, how did you handle the period where you felt therapy would be good, but Kevin wasn't yet on board yet? Because I think there might be more people in that current state where somebody feels like, hey, we should get help, but it may not be a realization for both parties just yet. How did you handle that interim period?
Well, I actually think for Kevin and I, we had a flip flop. So in the very beginning of our relationship, even if when I look back on it now, and this is like in the moment kind of thinking back, actually, because I don't know that I've realized it in real time, but when we first were newly married and I was getting into like reading books and podcasts and all of those things, I wanted Kevin to join in. It wasn't therapy, but I think it was my way of being like, something is wrong. Don't you want to listen to this podcast specifically from here to here? Don't you want to read this book, specifically these pages in this chapter? And he really wasn't with it. Fast forward, and again, when he was talking about I'm not equipped, these were almost he was crying out at this point, because I'm thinking I have a lot of information. I don't want to say all the information because that ain't true, but I have a lot of information. I've read a lot of books. I listen to a lot of podcasts. I'm actually, every therapist I've ever had has always said, like, girl, you're very introspective. Sometimes it's a bad thing, so I don't even say that, like, look at me, because sometimes they'd be like, girl, you should chill out. But anyway, having all of that information, and I'm like, we need to do this, we need to do this, we need to do this, and he's like, I'm ill-equipped. I really want us to do therapy. Then I had to come to the point where I'm like, okay, I agree, because the scariest part about therapy is that it is extremely vulnerable. You will go in there and you will say, um, well, he walked out the house and I was crying because I didn't understand why he would leave me like that. And your therapist is like, well, let's talk about your abandonment and rejection issues. And you're like, first of all, how did we get there so quickly? Abandonment, rejection. Ma'am, I said he walked out the door and that pissed me off. And now you're asking me about abandonment. I'm confused on your connection. Well, when's the first time you felt abandoned? Was it your mother? Was it your father? And you're like, well, now I'm crying because yes, indeed, it was my mother. Like, and all of a sudden it's this. And so thinking about, oh my God, we're going to go into therapy and they're going to actually see me. It's super vulnerable and that's really scary. But I know I said all of that and people are like, yeah, that's the reason I ain't going. But let me tell you something about the really beautiful thing about therapy. And I think we did a phenomenal job on this book, and it is something that can be a conversation starter, which is why it's 12 conversations. We hope that it is a prompt in your relationship to start having these conversations. What you will find is as you're having them and you start diving deep, you reach a point where you're at, I don't, where do we go from here? I don't quite know what the next step is. That's where your therapist steps in. And what they allow you to do, this is an intervention our therapist just did like this week or maybe last week, and it's literally one of my favorites. They allow you to redo a moment. And you have this moment, Kevin slams the door. This doesn't happen, but this is the example I've been using, so we're going to continue it. Kevin slams the door, and I'm sitting, and I can't stand you, and you left, and da da da, and I'm going off. And so he's like, first of all, and he's meeting this energy. You sit in therapy, and she's going to tell you this is abandonment, this is rejection, da da da. If you could redo this moment, what would you have said? And then suddenly, this energy turns into, I really just wanted to talk about this with you because it was really important to me that I felt like we were teammates and we were in it together and we were able to come to a resolution together. And instead, when you walked out the door, that told me you didn't care about us, you didn't care about me, and you didn't care about fixing this situation. And that really hurts me because this relationship is so important to me. Immediately, walls break down. Immediately, the defensiveness that comes with this energy is met with, oh man, I'm sorry. I didn't mean to do that. I was flooded with emotion. I didn't know how to handle it. I didn't want to hurt your feelings. And so I had to remove myself. The opportunity to redo those type of moments, and not lead with your harder, angrier emotions and lead with your softer emotions are interventions that we don't know as regular people. I didn't see my mama lead with her softer side. I didn't see my daddy lead with his softer side. I saw them argue. I saw them fuss. I saw them fight. And that's what we take in. What we saw is what we do. And a therapist allows you to be taught something different so you can do something different.
Imagine a life where your money isn't strangled by mortgage payments. Imagine what you could do when you don't have to send them money that you work so hard for. Come get simple, powerful, and real solutions to eliminating monthly mortgage payments forever. America's #1 money couple presents Crush My Mortgage. In this exclusive course, you will be equipped with strategies to help you move faster toward the promised land of owning your house free and clear. Learn strategies to help you in the areas of payment acceleration, extra income generation, and wealth creation, all to help you crush your mortgage. Visit crushmymortgage.com and get started today. Join us on the path to power, freedom, and legacy. That's crushmymortgage.com.
Good stuff. Kevin, I'm wondering, because you're super introspective and just over the years, and just I've seen you have a desire to foster a healthy marriage, like with intentionality, not just trying to skate to the finish line. Talk about why it's important for men to lead in this area, not just hope she gets it or hope she gets fixed or hope she changes. Talk about the work that you did as a leader in leading, trying to lead your marriage to a healthy place.
Do they call you pastor on his and her podcast?
Every blue moon.
Well, I'm calling you pastor today, and first lady's missing on the his and her. It's just his today.
She'll be back. She'll be back.
Honestly, I don't even think I was thinking that in the moment. I just thought that, as the head of the household and as a husband, like, this marriage to this woman is something that's important to me, right?
All he do is play all day.
No, it is. But it's something that's important to me. It's important to me that we have a healthy marriage, that our children see a healthy marriage. We don't want them to I don't not necessarily not see us argue, but they've seen us handle conflict in a healthy manner. Like, their origin story is going to be the marriage they saw, right?
Sure.
And the way how they grew up in this house. And I think if I'm reluctant to do what's necessary, in this case, the therapy thing, I was making the suggestions, but that was only because Mellisa had laid the foundation, right? I don't want it to seem like I was like therapy for us and she was reluctant. She had been communicating therapy via podcasts and other means. Because the other thing that we can honestly be honest about, therapy's not necessarily a something that can't be actualized for everybody. Some people don't have the money, time, or resources. It's expensive. So, you go what you can, do what you can, talk to your parents, talk to your friends, but none of those people are licensed to do it. So you basically do the best you can. And I think it's just important for a man to say, this is important to me. I believe we should do this, or I agree with you that we should do this. I think a lot of times the fear of therapy or the fear of the unknown allows us to shrink back, right? Same reason we don't be going to the doctor. Nothing can be diagnosed with me being wrong if I don't go to the doctor.
But you
Right.
still be wrong.
But just because it's not diagnosed
broken.
doesn't mean you don't have it.
Right.
You're not struggling with it. You just haven't been properly diagnosed, and actually properly diagnosing you is the only way to attack that issue. And I think that's kind of why it was important to me. And I think it's important to men as the leaders to care for the relationship, right? And not to fight against your wife if she's the one that's suggesting it, because the same way you would want to protect your house with a gun or dog or alarm system, you should also want to protect and nurture your marriage with that same fervor that you want to do some property or some things.
I love you guys, not just the title, but I love the subtitle. It's 12 conversations to keep laughing, loving, and learning with your partner. A lot of marriages are just surviving. They're getting through every 24 hours. They're going to work. They fighting through traffic. They're trying to figure out what's for dinner, trying to make sure the kids' homework is done, and then they do it again the next day and the next day after that. Why is it important for us to intentionally make room for laughing, loving, and learning with each other?
Some of the best times in relationships is when they're first new, when they're first starting out, because you're learning each other. Everything you have to tell me is new. What's your favorite color? Oh, I didn't know that. I love it so much. I also love the color blue. When's your birthday? Oh, you're a Taurus. I love Taurus. Are you bullheaded and stubborn? Oh, I love that about you. Everything is exciting and everything is new. And when you get into a relationship for long term, those things, it's mundane. I literally tell Kev sometimes, we heard this on a Chris Rock said this, and I say it to Kev all the time. We've been together for so long. He'll tell me a story and I'm like, can you please get kidnapped? I need you to tell me a new story. I've heard the story a gazillion times. If you go get kidnapped, you'll have a new adventure. You'll have come back and tell me something new. I need something different. Do not tell me the same story I've heard 3,000 times. And so I think with as you stay in a relationship, it what allows a relationship to sustain. But sometimes that can get boring is the word I'm gonna use, Pastor. Boring. That can get boring sometimes. And so you do have to be really, really intentional, even down to, we talk about this in the book, but it's so true, even down to date night. You're married for 15 years and you're like, we need date nights because we don't go out anymore. And so you go on these date nights, and then those start to become the exact same thing over and over. We're going to get dressed up. We're going to go to a steakhouse and we're going to come home, and that's going to be the end.
Maybe have sex afterward.
And maybe have sex afterward.
Hopefully.
And I told Kevin, even now, actually, I'm trying to do this. Like, we're going to do a bunch of different things for date nights. Do something fun together again. Do something that's going to cause you to laugh. Do something that's going to cause you to learn. Do something different, or a first together. So I've literally, as an example, have been looking for improv classes. I was just actually talking to Cam, he does everything. But our tech guy here, and I was like, I want to do an improv class. I've never taken one. Kevin has never taken like a formal improv class.
I'm just already good.
Yeah. So I'm like, that would be fun. It's a first. It's something we can do together. It will force us to laugh, because I'm sure we're going to be either really, really good or really horrible. Either way, you're going to have a good time, and you're going to be learning something. Going out of your way about being intentional about putting in things that cause you to learn and laugh in your relationship is the only way it's going to sustain. And you're going to be able to shake up some of that, like the mundane of every life, the routine of every life, because that's really that's really a killer of romance to me. Is like, I'm just tired and I'm bored and we haven't done
This is
anything
boring.
exciting. Yeah, this is boring. And so just doing something fun again, it can take you back to the beginning years of your relationship when literally everything was a first, when literally I'm learning about you and every story is new to me.
And to answer part of the last part, the learning thing, like, right, you have the His and Her Money podcast. You and your wife are what I would consider experts,
Mhm.
right? But you're experts not because you learned a lot 10, 15 years ago. You're experts because you continually learn.
Sure.
You are probably heard about Bank of America's new mortgage program, zero down for minority borrowers. You've probably heard, you've had thoughts about crypto. You watch what happened with the market. You constantly learn about what's important to you. And that same thing applies to my wife. I must constantly learn the version of her that she is now,
Sure.
because we've been married almost 20 years. The version of her in dating's not the same as when we first got married. When we first got married and didn't have kids, it's not the same as when we had one kid, not the same as two kids, not the same as when she had a job she liked, didn't like, when I had a job, when I got fired. Like, all these different versions of us matter. And you've kind of got to be up to date on the current version of your spouse, and therefore always learning to be successful. A lot of times we think marriages fail because people stop learning about their spouse, but your spouse doesn't stop changing
Mm.
and growing. Even your cell phone, you get your cell phone, iPhone, Android, whatever, every once in a while they send an update. Hey, here's some things that are changing with this, or you're getting a new one. Imagine going from having an iPhone in 2001 and not having one, and then picking one back up in 2018 or 2022. You're familiar with that phone, but there's a whole bunch of stuff that's different now.
Mhm.
That's the same thing that with your marriage. You have to be constantly working with, talking to, and loving the current version of your spouse. And therefore, you have to be learning about them all the time.
Love it.
That was. Hey, Kevin, that was good, man. That was good. Let's go to church just a little bit because part of the dysfunction that showed up early on in your marriage was some misguided theology that you grew up in. So I'm curious because it's easy to get to that place, point your finger at the church, and abandon the church and say, everybody's phony, everybody's a crook, don't nobody know what they're doing. How did you all deal with the frustrations of some of the things that you were given via the church being misguided and still holding on to your faith, moving forward, and still using that to help strengthen your marriage as you all continue to move forward?
I have retroactively given a lot of the, I'm just going to say, adults in my life from my childhood a lot of forgiveness and a lot of grace. They didn't mean no harm. They also didn't know no better. And so if I can accept that I am making mistakes with my kids today, but I promise you I'm doing the very best that I can, it makes it a lot easier to offer grace to those adults who were absolutely 100% doing the best they could with the knowledge that they had. And they really didn't mean any harm. Caused harm aside, they didn't mean it. They didn't intend to cause any, trauma or harm or any of that. And if I can separate intent from impact, and if I can separate God's people from God, then I can live in a space where I can have this relationship and maintain my relationship with God and accept people as people, and people that are flawed, and people that make mistakes, and people that are deserving of forgiveness and grace because they really are doing the best that they can. And if you can negotiate all of those things and even see yourself in that, I'm the adult now. I'm not the kid. I'm the adult. I'm going to make mistakes. I would want that same grace from my children and the kids in my life. I would hope that when they're 36 and they realize, I don't know what I'm doing, I was looking at my auntie and my mama and them like they knew. They didn't know. They didn't know because I don't know. I'm trying. I really am, but I don't know. And so I am in a space where I offer a lot of grace and a lot of forgiveness that either wasn't asked for, or well, that's it. They just asked for it, but I understand I can offer it, and I can maintain my relationship with Christ without it being tainted by human experience.
I think you just brought up a good point. That's a marriage principle too, be intentional about recognizing whether or not your spouse is doing the best that they can currently. I think sometimes the frustration of it not being the version that we want blinds the effort, even if it's minimal, even if it's progressive, any wisdom there, because it can be by default our nature to say, you ain't X, Y, and Z, you're not doing X, Y, and Z, but we're not missing or we're not seeing what they're actually doing. Have you all come across that? How have you all fostered the ability to give grace to your spouse on the journey?
I think
That was a good
that
question.
was a good question, man. You should do a podcast. I think one thing that's helpful is understanding context, right? The context of the situation. For example, I know my wife's not a morning person. I am. So when I wake up full of glee, right? And I'm like, "Oh, good morning." And she looked at me like she want to burn my soul out with her eyes. At first I used to be like, "Dang, man, why is she tripping?" And then I realized she ain't that person in the morning, nor at night. But from like noon to 7,
No. From like noon to 2.
she's everything you want her to be. Also, when I get tired, it's over. Cranky baby, toddler. You got to put a baby down for a nap. I got to go night. So understanding that, obviously she'd want me to show up better, but if she knows I'm tired, like for instance, if we, Melissa tends to want to hang out with friends more than I do a lot of times. And my social battery runs out before hers a lot of times, which might be surprising to people. She knows that if we went to lunch with her homegirl and his husband, or her husband, her homegirl and her homegirl's husband, and it's supposed to be like an hour and a half lunch. It's 2:15, 2:25. I'm fading. I'm doing the best I can to keep going because I want to go to bed. So when we finished, she was like, "Thank you. I know that you were tired," because I was already tired. I know that she was like, "That ain't really like the thing you love to do." So, but she knows I was giving her the best version of me that I could give her.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's part of giving the same benefit of the doubt that we give to people in life all the time, right? If you watch an athlete play and you know he hurt himself and he's still playing through, you don't expect him or her to operate at the same level as when they are not injured or young.
Yeah.
LeBron James been in the league 20 years. You don't expect him to dunk like he was when he was in there in year 2. Offer your spouse the same grace when you know they had a bad day at work, they're on their period, they're tired, they're hungry,
Don't
whatever.
do my girls out there.
I was just talking about you. That allows you more context to deal with the situation if you give them grace that, this is where they are or this is who they are.
Right.
Sometimes, and I know I'm going over a little bit, sometimes knowing a person and how they are and accepting it is much better than wishing they were different.
Oh yeah, 100%.
You can deal with who they are. My wife knows I get tired at 9:30. I'm a lot of great things, but after 9,
7,
I got to, because I'm up at 5 and working out and creating videos. I'm sure she wishes I could be different, but in some ways I am who I am and she is who she is, and dealing with that version is much better qualifier. I'm not talking about somebody that hurts you, abuse you, anything like that. I'm talking about personality traits type of thing. Knowing that about her or about me just makes us easier to deal with, and therefore it makes your marriage easier to work with.
Yeah, good stuff, man. Now there's a chapter missing from the book. I was looking for it. I didn't find Money Be Hard.
That's real.
I didn't see that chapter.
You right about it.
It ain't in there?
No, not the Money Be Hard.
We saved that for y'all.
Yeah.
Money Be Hard.
But here's the thing. I mean, you all are truly inspiring, inspiring people like us that are fellow content creators and just people in general, the way that you all have conducted your business independently and just built something of your own, one brick at a time. That didn't come without a ton of risk. That didn't come without a ton of guts and courage. And you all built this thing together. So talk about some of the principles or some of the things that have allowed you to, y'all got your own doggone studio in Hollywood. You're sitting in it. That's yours.
Hollywood.
Okay? That thing is yours. Okay. And a lot of chocolate people can't say they got their own
Right, yeah.
studio. All right. So, but we've seen, those of us who've been watching you all for long enough, we know that's not how the game started. That's where you all are at today. That's not even the end of the story. But just along the journey, you all have had to have some tough conversations. You all have had to evaluate the risk of this decision versus that decision. You all have had to trust the vision that you have and support it. Talk through those conversations about financial decisions that you all have made that have allowed you to build something great as a couple independently together.
Um, I want to be deep, but I think this answer is more simple.
Do it.
A lot of our success in finances specifically has come from getting on the same page, being on the same page. Some of that is by the grace Melissa's parents, especially her dad, good grasp of money. Melissa, great grasp of money, desire to have good credit, desire to be debt free, desire to own a home. Sometimes people come into marriages without even those agreements. So some of that is just luck of the draw. I had a lot of those same things, right? Secondly, we had conversations and similar goals, right? We wanted to get out of credit card debt some years ago. Instead of just saying, we want to get out of debt, we want to get out of debt, we want to get out of debt, Melissa actually found a couple ways to attack debt, right? To get out of it. We did a snowball. It's called a snowball. I'm sure you're familiar with it. And because she knows I'm like, I want to go vacation, I want to live life, we agreed we would snowball from about January 1st to Thanksgiving, right? And then from Thanksgiving to January 1st, we could ball out a little bit. Our snowball money was, I could take the family to Vegas. We could
And
go.
by ball out, it was a golf ball.
It was
It wasn't.
relative ball out. But we agreed with that, right? That was her compromise because she could have went. I think it was like 3 or 4 years it took us.
I don't think it was that long, but yeah.
She could have went that whole time, never missing a payment.
Yeah.
But knowing me, I want to again. We go. I want to stay in a hotel. I want somebody to bring my food. I want somebody to make my bed, right? But getting on that same page and not having debt allowed us to take the next thing. Having good credit allowed us to get, because when your business is young, like we've got our first podcast studio, they're checking your personal credit.
Sure enough.
Right.
This building is in somebody's name.
Right. So I often say Melissa and I's life now is the consequences of a lot of good decision making. Right.
Results.
The result of a lot of good decision making. Mm-hmm. Right. Going to college allowed us access to certain jobs. Not having sex before marriage, not getting pregnant before marriage allowed us certain freedom. It allowed us to get to know each other without kids. Saving money, financing allowed us to do X, Y, and Z. Both knowing, both of our parents teaching us that if you get a raise and you raise your finances, then you didn't get a raise. You are exactly the same. So that's not something I had to explain to her, nor did she have to explain it to me. Us both being okay staying in a smaller house that we could have outgrown for 2 or 3 years allowed us to get to the house that we have now. Both of us wanting to own it. Like a lot of that stuff is luck, but the majority of it is the result of a lot of good decision making and being on the same page and talking about those things and compromising as well. It's the consistent doing that well gets you where you are now, or got us where we are now.
I love it. I love it. I know it's going to be in the next book because y'all got a lot to teach us about building a business together. But before we land this plane, for everybody who is about to go get their copy of Marriage Be Hard, let them know a little bit of what they'll find in this book and where they can pick up a copy.
The book will be available at Target, at Barnes and Nobles, Amazon, of course, independent book retailers, and it will be available on Audible in an audio form narrated by Kevin and I. And what you can expect in the pages of the book is an authentic story that is often hilarious about some of the lessons we've learned throughout our 18-year marriage, 20 years together. A couple of my personal favorite chapters that I mentioned are the quarantine chapter. That's a personal favorite because it's 2022. So that means quarantine was 2 years ago. Okay. So we're not talking about all the stuff that happened, so long ago. Some of this stuff was literally, it's 2 years today because the book is now out. But at the time we were writing it, it was happening then. Okay. Those were revelations in that, like, we went to therapy last week and we found this. So can we now add that into the book now? Because now we have different words to say than we said last week. Last week, I know we had talked about this, but we went to therapy and now we have a better understanding. Like, quite literally, that was happening in that quarantine chapter. So that's one of my favorite chapters. And then, like I said, that parenting chapter is another really, really, really great favorite of mine because I think it truly is one of those chapters that can start a conversation that I'm not quite sure I've heard other relationship people talk about and the way that we've been able to identify and talk about. And then, of course, you have some hilarious stories about Ajax. You have some hilarious stories about, Kev's other experiences, Freaknik, and all of these things. And I think being able to, we're talking about a lot of really dense information. It's really great information, but being able to give it to people in a way that's digestible is hopefully the goal. And at the end, that you just are able to have some really great conversation prompts between you and your spouse or your partner.
Good stuff. Now, I know that there's somebody who clicked this episode because they saw the title Marriage Be Hard. And they clicked it because their marriage is in a hard place. And they're wondering, is there a light at the end of the tunnel? If you had a chance to talk to that person one-on-one, what would you tell them?
I would tell them that no matter where your marriage is, it can be better if you're both willing to work on it. This book is just a beginning step to help you get back on track. Hopefully, with other steps, love, therapy, time, you can get out of that place. There was times in our marriage where we felt like, man, I don't know if this particular thing is ever going to get better. And we can tell you now that it has, because of what we just said: time, love, therapy, understanding, context, and it would be possible. And this book can be just a piece of the part of what we'll call your treatment, right? This is part of getting there. Sometimes it's as simple as being able to put words to your feelings. Those podcasts Melissa was sharing with me early before we went to therapy, that was just somebody else accurately defining how she felt. So if she didn't have the words, she could say, Kev, this is what I be feeling. Yeah. And this book might just be that for you. So you at least have a place that you can understand yourself and your spouse can understand you. And that often is a great step forward to rekindling the fire and repairing some damaged areas in your marriage.
Yeah, and the only thing I would add to it is if you clicked on this episode because you saw Marriage Be Hard and you're like, man, that's me. I would say you're not alone. Um, Marriage is hard sometimes. It is. It is really, really a beautiful thing, and sometimes it is the toughest group project you will ever do in your entire life. But that doesn't mean, to Kevin's point, that it can't be better if you stick to it and you're dedicated and you wake up and make a choice to choose your relationship every single day. And sometimes that choice has to come with support, and support often comes in the form of a book, Marriage Be Hard, a podcast, and therapy.
Thank y'all so much for sharing that great wisdom. Let everybody know how they can consume all the amazing content that you all create.
Get the book, Marriage Be Hard, wherever books are sold. Follow me at Kev on Stage, Melissa at Miss Kev on Stage. Our website is those names with .com at the end. And shoot, link in our bio. Whatever we're doing, click the link in our bio. It'll be up to date on what we have. If you're listening to this in the future, click the link in our bio. Guarantee we got something that we're promoting.
Facts.
If you listen to this in the past, how you get that time machine?
Tell us.
Everybody be like, what? Guys, thank you so much for taking time out of your schedule to come on and share this wisdom.
Thank you.
All right.
Bye.